Sold for sex. The feds busting a human trafficking ring right here in the Twin Cities.
Fox 9 first breaking the news of the indictment on our website, myfox9.com. And tonight, we take a closer look now at who's behind the ring. We find out just how young the victims were, and we talk to an expert who says this is more common than you might think, right here in our own backyard.
And we're going to start with Tom Lydon, who's got the very latest on the investigation. Tom, earlier you were saying that we're talking girls as young as 13?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, Jeff. Investigators believe this activity with this gang actually may have gone on for more than a decade. They call it human trafficking, but in essence, it's a kind of slavery right here in Minnesota where young girls are forced to have sex to survive in the gang. With their smiling faces, it looks like a page out of a high school yearbook with nicknames like Shorty, Fat Boy, and Boss Lady. But federal prosecutors say they're all members of a gang called the Somali Mafia, or junior gangs called the Somali Outlaws and Lady Outlaws. And for the girls, membership came at a terrible price.
Indentured servitude.
And not just servitude, but rape. St. Paul Police Chief Tom Smith said the case began 2 years ago with concerns from Somali elders.
There are parents that had young daughters as young as 12 years old that were trafficked, and I don't want to lose sight of that.
4 girls in all, ages 12, 13, 14, and 16, identified as Jane Does, taken to apartments in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, a hotel in Richfield, and forced to have sex.
Individuals who were within the gang did not have to pay, but individuals outside the gang did.
The girls were even flown to Nashville, Seattle, and Ohio, where their age was part of the appeal. Fat Boy allegedly telling a John he had a little girl who was a really young one, just developing right now.
Fear, intimidation, threats of violence, acts of violence. That's the reasons why some of these individuals stay involved with this.
In simultaneous raids this morning, 17 were arrested in the Twin Cities, 8 more in Nashville. In federal court this afternoon, their families were in disbelief. This man's the father of one of the suspects, Abdullahi Afayari, a.k.a. Forehead. Through a translator, he said his son is a workaholic college student, not a pimp.
This is a baseless thing. We, as religious people, do not believe in engaging with sex trade.
At the end of the day, if we can keep young women safe, we've done our due diligence.
And federal prosecutors believe these indictments may indeed send a message, but they also realize this may just be the tip of the iceberg. And they credit the Somali community itself with bringing it to their attention. All 17 of those indicted here in Minnesota will face extradition in Tennessee, this case being handled at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Nashville. But really the lead agency for all of this was the Jerry Vick Task Force in St. Paul Police Department, named after the officer who, this was really his passion. He murdered, of course, by a suspect.
Yeah, well, okay, so a lot of people out there are saying these young girls were brought into this. Why couldn't they just leave? Not that easy.
Right, not that easy, and also there was a tremendous amount of force. These gang members actually threatened them and said, hey, if you don't cooperate with us, we'll harm your family. These young girls, very impressionable, believe that, in fact, their families' lives were on the risk,
kind of the same,
as well.
The same tactics as a cult, almost.
It is. Clearly, these kids are indoctrinated into this. They're brainwashed to some extent. There is really a whole phenomenon. You also have to appreciate that these kids and these families were also somewhat isolated because of language and culture. That allowed the gangs to manipulate.
And the other question, I guess, then is are all these suspects here legally?
All here legally. Some are, in fact, U.S. citizens.